Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Odd Job Entertainment, bringing you another video. And Virpil announced a new Atlas Force Feedback base. This is pretty exciting if you are a Virpil customer. This would essentially give you the ability to use force feedback, which is a way of getting the game to send forces to your joystick. This is something that has been waiting for some certain patents to expire, and now it seems like we are getting a wealth of options on the consumer market. Let's check out the trailer and then I'll give you my thoughts about it. So you can see that this stick is kind of moving around while his hand's not on it. That's one of the most obvious ways to see in a video, at least, that something has force feedback. Essentially, there are motors driving it in the X and Y directions, and that moves the stick according to the forces that the game is telling it about. So not every game's going to do it very well. Your mileage will vary a lot depending on that level of integration. Something like DCS or Microsoft Flight Simulator, they're going to have much better support than probably the majority of other flight sim focused games. Like I said, your mileage may vary. So at the very least, it does allow you to do things like set custom torque profiles for how the stick will behave. And because it's not dependent on something physical like a spring, then you get a lot more granularity with how you can make your sticks behave. That aspect of it is really cool in every game, but as far as getting the game to talk back and send those forces to your hands, might not work. You'll have to check your game specifically to see if it's supported. Presumably he's having to fight it really hard in that scene, right? Okay. I want to pause it right here. This is something really important. This is a strand of Dyneema rope. That's going to be important for our discussion later. They quote a max torque of 22 kilogram forces, or I think they say like 60 Newton meters. We'll check the spec page. So this is pretty high up there as far as the force that it can produce. It's not the highest, but it's really good. I mean, you can imagine having to fight back 20 kilograms. That's a lot of force. So it will definitely give you a run for your money. And depending on how you tune it, you could turn your flight sim session into a workout. Okay, that was another really important section. We're gonna go back, watch that again. All right, so we see the motor moving, and then this strand of rope moves like this relative to the motor. I believe what they are using is a capstan drive. So we will take a look at another YouTuber's video on what those are. But essentially this is a way of doing a pulley without doing a pulley. There's a number of benefits. There are some trade-offs, and we'll talk about those as well. So what they're trying to show there is that depending on what your craft is doing, you might need very little force at all to get the stick to move. Because what you're fighting in real life is not a spring and a set of gimbals. You're fighting the forces that are acting on your airframe, right? So if you are just coasting along, the stick will move pretty easily and it will take a very light touch. But if you're trying to pull out of a nosedive, like you're Maverick and Top Gun. You know, that's going to take a lot more force to pull back on because you're fighting that intense drag pushing your ship down as you're trying to pull it up. Look at the interior. They show a e-stop button there. It's good that it has an e-stop. I mean, when this thing can throw you around with 22 kilograms of force, yeah, you need an e-stop. This could actually cause injury if you leave it unrestrained. Okay, so that's the Atlas grip, or base, sorry. Now, how much would you pay for something like this? Would you pay $445? I think that that's a pretty fair price, but that's not the price. This is a $445 pre-order deposit. So the actual price, if you get it pre-order, right now it's $900. At retail, it will be $1,000. And then if you're someone like me who plays Star Citizen, you'll need 2 of these. So make that $2,000. Shipping estimate late Q4 2026. That's actually the bigger concern that I have, more so than the price. Like, I'll be honest, if you are a fan of Virpil products, I think the price is probably not that much of a concern. You're already someone who enjoys a premium product. You're not afraid to throw down some cash to have a superior experience. The Constellation Alpha Primes that I've been using in games recently, those cost me about, well, I want to say it's like $600 per side. Let's see. Because you get the Alpha Prime sticks, and then you need the corresponding base, which I have the Warbird D. So yeah, let's just say $600 per side. Depending on if you get on sale or not, it will be different. So they know who their market is. There are people who already are willing to pay a hefty premium to get the best experience. And the force feedback base is going to allow you to do things that no other mechanical system will do. Because the force comes from motors, that force can be tuned dynamically according to what's happening in the game. So if you want it to be a very, let's assume no force feedback at all. You're actually just using it to tune torque profiles. You could have it be very low in the middle of the movement and then skyrocket high much more exponentially than a spring is capable of by tuning the motor curve. You can have things be very light all around. You can make it behave like it's a very damped stick, which is going to be more useful for things like using it as a throttle or using it for a helicopter, things like that. So you can get a lot of different characteristics out of the same base by having the force come from a motor instead of a mechanical linkage system. Some of the problems that these bases do tend to have is something called cogging, and they actually say that it has no cogging in this panel here. What we're talking about when we say cogging is if we look at a graph like this, well, first, if we look at the internals of a motor, you have the stator and the rotor. And depending on your motor arrangement, these can be on the outside versus the inside. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is you always have a orientation where the magnets are going to be passing by a number of coils of copper. Okay? When a magnet is perfectly in line with the coils, that represents the point where the force pulling them together is the highest. And as you deviate to either direction of that force is going to resist your movement. And so you can see that reflected in a torque curve like this. As you try to pull a magnet away, the torque required is going to go up, and then it's going to come back down as it kind of snaps to the next position. There's a couple ways to solve this. One of them that is very common, especially, or that you've probably heard of, especially if you use 3D printers, is something called microstepping. That's kind of everybody's first introduction to stepper motors. And what you do with microstepping is you send the power not to the closest coil, but to a combination of coils that help you attenuate that curve to be much more gradual. So you can almost eliminate that cogging torque. It's not perfect, and there will always still be a little bit left, but it's probably not enough that you'll be able to notice it. So microstepping is one way to solve that. And the other thing that they talk about is backlash. And that comes back to the capstan drive that it appears that they are using. So we take a look. This is just a blown up photo of the drive from their website. You can see this is the red rope that continues all the way around, and it looks like they do several loops. There is actually a capstan equation that dictates that the angle of rotation for a rope around a post has a exponential effect on the frictional force that that rope experiences. So a capstan is usually used, or it's known for being used in naval applications, right? So this is a ship capstan, and essentially if you have an operator grab the slack end of the rope, they can grab this end and then they can hold an entire ship in place with just their efforts, because what happens is the friction of the rope gets multiplied by the number of loops going around the capstan, and then that provides the holding force for the boat. So you're not actually holding the boat yourself, but you're getting a huge assist from the friction from this capstan. Okay. Now, this is one of my favorite YouTubers, Mr. Musha. Please check out his channel, Aid Musa. Sorry, not Musha, Musa. He made a whole robot dog with this concept, and I want to show you I want to show you this short because it gives you kind of a blown out view of how the capstan drive works, and then I think it's going to make a lot of sense as to what they're doing inside the Virpil force feedback base.
This is a capstan drive, and it's better than gears. Essentially, a capstan drive is a rope-driven speed reducer. Imagine 2 gears, but without the teeth. So now, they're just drums. And instead of using teeth to transmit torque, we have tensioned rope wrapped around the drums. And not just any ordinary rope, but a rope called Dyneema DM20, which has a creep rate of essentially 0. The main benefit of a capstan drive is that it has virtually 0 backlash. A capstan drive also has low noise, low cost, low inertia, and high torque transparency. And all of these benefits make them optimal for robotics, as I've proven time and time again. You can get the CAD.
All right, so I think that makes it pretty clear what they're doing. Then if we go and look back at this photo, it seems pretty obvious that is in fact what they're doing. So this curve here along the bottom of this gimbal section, that is essentially a small piece of a much larger flywheel. And because we only need this section, we can make the base significantly smaller by not including it. So what we're looking at with this small spindle with the Dyneema wrapped around it is a huge torque multiplication going through, let's say this is like 2 centimeters to, what would you think that this profile here is? 10, 20? So huge force multiplication. So you can get away with using a much weaker motor, which is going to be cheaper, while still giving that total torque that you're looking for in a force feedback system. They can be a little bit tricky to tune because you have to, as mentioned in the short, these have to be tensioned ropes, right? So you can see they've got some kind of mechanism here where it looks like by tightening these screws, you can either increase or lower the tension on the rope. You're going to want to have that relatively high so that there's no slipping occurring. And that slipping would occur because if it's slack enough that there's gaps around the capstan, then the capstan can't do anything. You have to have it tight enough that the rope is at least making contact, then the capstan can actually do something for you. Why would you want to use this over something like a belt and pulley system like I think the FF Beast uses? Well, pulleys are great for a lot of applications, but they do have a second edition of cogging and backlash that they introduce. When you're looking at a... Let's see, I'll just search it this way. 3D printer belt. When we're talking about a belt-driven system, because of the irregular profile, meaning that you go just the belt, and then you have a tooth, and then you have the belt, and then you have a tooth, and then you have the belt, then you have a tooth, and so on. Because of that irregular shape, the belt doesn't bend the same way consistently. So if you can imagine pulling that belt around a very small pin, right? As you pull it around, that tooth is going to be very hard to bend, where the toothless section is going to be very easy to bend. That is still happening at larger radii, it's just much less noticeable. The other thing that happens is there is always going to be a slight mismatch between what the belt tooth looks like and what the pulley tooth looks like. The way that you compensate for this on the design side is you make it so that the teeth are tapered relative to one another so that they kind of pull into a low backlash situation. But there's always going to be that in and out play that is going to cause a little extra movement in a belt and pulley system over something like a capstan drive that's well tuned. So the trade-off for a capstan, as it's shown in this video, is you can't have these things rotate forever, right? We have a fairly limited range of motion for this joint, but for the application that Aid is using for his robot dog, it's perfect. It doesn't need to move that far. But unlike a belt and pulley system, it gets a little bit trickier to get this thing to do a full rotation around. Well, what's another application where you don't need that much range of motion? A gimbal for a joystick. We're talking 36 degrees total, so a capstan drive makes a lot of sense for something that you want to be very precise in a very narrow range of movement. So I think that it is a very good design. I like a lot of what I'm seeing here. My concern is not so much the price, it is when are you actually going to get this thing? And this is where I have to really put my foot down and say, this is probably not for me. I ordered a pair of Cadet Aeromax grips, left and right, back in October of 2025. It is currently, time of recording, June 2026. So we're coming up on a year mark. I mean, okay, I'll be a little more courteous. It's still 4 months out before we hit that year mark. But still, we're talking 8 months of waiting for these grips to get to my house. Like, that is not a time frame that I think most people are going to be comfortable with. If you're already a Virpil customer, you do know that they have those kinds of delays, but I don't think that you're used to that level of delay. From what I've heard, people are used to waiting 3 months. You could be waiting a year or more for something like this to actually get to your house. So I do want to point you to some other options that do exist. By WinWing or Wind Control, there is the Cyber Taurus base. They have the Cyber Taurus EB82 Metal, kind of like an anime name, I guess. This is their strongest model, and you can see the stats here. The 82 Metal gives a rated torque of 82 Newton meters. That puts it about on par with what the Atlas can do. Let's see, I can do the conversion, but I don't want to. Do they list it anywhere here? Yes, they do. Okay, so peak power 45, sustained power 25. It is important to note that you're not going to be having that 45 Newton meters all the time, right? That's peak power. That is like a sudden jerk on the stick. It's not going to be what you're constantly fighting all the time. But 22 kilograms of force. Okay, that's great. If you want the very most powerful option, then you are going to be looking at something like the Cybertaurus. It's got, what is that? About 3 times the rated sustained power, assuming that this is, in fact, the sustained power. So, there you go. Extreme Torque supports extension rod, 0 force feedback loss. And that is another aspect that we need to point out. This is the rated torque. Torque is the force multiplied by the perpendicular distance from the axis of rotation. So if we scroll through this page, they show a diagram of what it is like with the different extensions. All right, so you can add different extensions. Here we go. Peak force versus holding force based on extension length. So the very strongest experience is going to be with no extension. Essentially, this is like having a tiny wheel on a go-kart, right? The odds that it's going to skid out, pretty high, if we're thinking of this as a wheel, because the torque that it can produce are higher than what the tire can resist at that point, right? But if we're talking about something big like a truck, you know, that would be your flight stick extension with 200 millimeters. You're going to be able to resist that motion a lot easier than if you have no extension at all. Okay, we're just talking levers here. If you add an extension, you are increasing your leverage on the motors, and so you're going to have an easier time fighting them. Does that matter? It's up for you to decide. It's just something that you should know about if you're planning out a build based around this motor unit. If you have some kilogram force in mind that you want to experience, that's going to dictate what extensions you're allowed to use. If you need more torque at a larger extension than what the Atlas Pro can do, well, then you might be looking at something like the Cybertaurus. Now, I do need to point out, this is also a pre-order. I have no experience with wind control. I have no idea what kinds of delays to expect on this. All I know is what you see on the spec page, and in theory, it provides more torque than what the Atlas can do. Okay. Option that you can get today is the Moza AB9 FFB base. Again, I don't have any force feedback bases myself. It's something that I'm very interested in. Moza, if you're watching, send me a couple units. I'd love to do a review. Same goes for Virpil if they'll accept my call after this. You are taking a dip on the total force. This one only goes up to 12 Newton meters. And they have the cheaper AB6 base, which you actually get the sticks that they make for it as well for $400. As far as I can tell, there's not a way to get the base alone without the grip. So you're forced to do the bang for your buck option, which I'm not a super fan of. I do want to just get the AB6, but it only provides 6 Newton meters of torque, which is enough that you can do something with it, but it's not like you're going to be fighting it all that much, right? AB9, you might feel a bit more. I mean, it is double the force, but is that in the realm where you're going to feel like a fighter pilot pulling out of a steep nosedive? Probably not. So, where do I stand on a product like this? I guess to summarize, I think it's great that force feedback bases are becoming a more available option for consumers. I'd love to see way more on the market. I think it's good that we are getting this level of competition, because ultimately that will mean that future products are cheaper, better, and more reliable for the end consumer. I think that the Dyneema-based drive mechanism of the Atlas Pro is really cool, and I would love to see it in action and get my hands on it, but at the price that they're asking for, and with the delay that I just know there's going to be with Virpil, it's really hard for me to give any kind of recommendation that you go out and buy this. Of course, at the end of the day, it's not my goal to tell you how to spend your money. I just want you to be an informed customer. So these are my thoughts. Maybe it still makes a lot of sense to you, and that's great. If it does, please let me know what I'm missing down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what other people think of this. And hey, are you going to get yourself an Atlas? Let me know. But until next time, this is Odd Job Entertainment, signing off.